Content warning. This podcast contains bones, blood, smut, and swear words.
Before we get into the good shit this week, we wanted to remind you that we have launched a Patreon. So for just a few bucks a month, you can get extended games, brand new content, access to our notes and murder boards, and much more. Our first big piece of bonus content, a review of the classic and not at all flailed movie Waterworld, is coming out in the next 2 weeks. So if you would like to support Marie's epic quest to force her children to experience all the iconic cinema of the 1990s and 2000s, then you can head to our patreon.com. It's patreon.com/frontlinefifth, or follow the link in the show notes. Okay, now back to that sweet, sweet bone zone action.
Gong!
Act 1. Welcome, penitents. Hello and welcome to the Frontline Fifth, a Locked Tomb podcast where brand spanking new novitiates explore the Locked Tomb series for the first time, while a couple of dried out bone witches cackle over how little they really know. We're currently reading Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and this week we are taking a break from cleaning out our closets to find out what's in Harrow's, literally and figuratively, in chapters 28 and 29. I'm Marie, and I just escaped from a very intense and intimate fight between Necro and Cav, but I'm delighted to be here to introduce my co-host Hannah. Hannah, what's the most uncomfortable situation you've ever witnessed or overheard?
I feel like I'm usually the people that others are uncomfortably overhearing, but
Same.
I did once. I was on the street waiting for some other people to meet up with me and got to witness the loudest conversation that I've ever seen between two people who were having like an almost stabbing level fight over whether or not to go to breakfast at McDonald's or Dunk's. It was fucking intense. It was like I had 911 dialed in my phone, like ready to go. Like
Over which fast food breakfast? Communication skills could be improved upon here.
I actually seriously considered telling them that I would happily buy both of them breakfast at like a third location.
This is why the North needs Waffle Houses.
Also with us today are our sweet little necros, Brooke and John, who miraculously are not yet cracking up like everyone else in Canaan House, although maybe they are considering Dunkin' versus McDonald's versus Waffle House versus Cracker Barrel? Cracker Barrel? How the hell Cracker Barrel get in here? Anyway, Brooke, John, have you ever been adjacent to an uncomfortable fight drama but unable to leave?
Yeah, for me, there's nothing more uncomfortable to be around than somebody else getting scolded.
Oh.
Yeah. I teach piano as like a side gig, and whenever like the kids are kind of misbehaving and I'm just like handling it and then their parents decide to get involved, I'm like, can you do this once I'm gone?
Anytime you watch somebody in a store scolding their child who's misbehaving, it's like the thing that makes me most uncomfortable in the world.
And like for some reason I want to take the kid's side. It's like, it's okay. We'll get past this.
So I'm going to throw out that even though in our first few episodes we talked about how I would probably trip over myself and stab myself if I was dual wielding swords or something along those lines, I was mildly athletic enough to participate in youth sports, which is like the lowest bar imaginable. And so just always that awkward time where somebody screws up and then the coach like tries to correct it and then a parent gets involved, either like yelling from the sideline or anything else, or also when parents are like yelling at the refs. Just like when parents are generally misbehaving around sports is just the most awkward situation ever, especially when they're like yelling at kids, like when the game's getting reffed by someone that's a couple years older than the kids that are playing as like a volunteer, or they're making like $8 an hour.
Marie, your kids are in sports. What do you do?
The most intense thing, and I think that kind of curtailed a lot of our very early sports, was the very first time that we put Bart in soccer at like 3 years old. The very first game, we had like super intense parents from the other side, and our team was like, we're here to play soccer with 3-year-olds.
Also, your kids are American. They're not going to be good soccer players. Like, it's going to be fine.
I mean, true, but...
Marie, do you have any other, like, super awkward, uncomfortable fight dramas that you've watched unfold?
I caused them.
No way. Tell me more.
I see you, girl.
I think the one that probably embarrassed my children the most was, I don't remember what like movie we had gone to see, but it was a movie where I'd taken both the boys. It was like an afternoon matinee on the weekend, and there were teenagers in the back of the theater who would not settle down. So they were being disruptive throughout all of the previews. The movie was about to start, and I stood up and yelled at them.
Nice.
I've turned into my father.
My dad used to do this thing that would embarrass me horribly. If he's driving and somebody cuts him off in traffic, when they come up to a light together and they're parallel, he'll turn out the driver's side window. No, he claps. He's like, "Great job." And it's hilarious, and I died every day.
Before we get much further in our depressive, spiraling attempts to spite our necromancers this week, I wanted to ask if you had any big thoughts about these chapters you wanted to share.
I felt that the portrayal of Colum as his nephew's slave really, really sucked. No pun intended.
It took me a second.
Siphoning. One of the things I really love about this pair of chapters, and I kind of like, we alluded to it in this intro, is these really intense moments where you get insight into what a necro-cav relationship is like. Because we've seen a lot of it out of Gideon and Harrow, but we also know that Gideon and Harrow is complicated. This is a reminder, A, that everyone is complicated, and B, the depth of like dependence that you have on one another means that the stakes are just really high. The emotions are really high, and it's heavy. It's hard. It hurts. But it's like one of the most human parts of the book, I think.
Wait. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marie.
Sorry, go.
No. You go, please.
No, you go.
I was going to say that this was the week where I went like full darkly lit basement with a cigarette and like a like flippable chalkboard level of conspiracy where like it's dimly lit. I doubled the size of our murder board this week just by myself, just adding stuff. And so
Sorry, I forgot to tell you, I went in there and cleaned it up a little bit.
Marie, do you have any like big thoughts about these questions or chapters?
I feel like maybe this is finally the chapter where Brooke and John can be like, oh, why do you guys care about Colum at all? Also, the closets. Skeletons in the closet.
Incidentally, I wanted to ask if 7 counts as a meme because I couldn't not think, what's in the box? What's in the box? None of you saw 7?
Box?
Wait,
7 is a fabulous thriller, and Gwyneth Paltrow's head ends up in a box. Spoilers.
wow, this is with Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, Kevin Spacey, Gwyneth Paltrow. Oh my God.
It's an exceptional horror movie thriller thing.
Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the tea. Both kinds. As we present episode 14, A House of Broken Promises. Act 2, The Only Birth Amidst a Sea of Tiny Tombs. That's you, John.
yeah. This section of Frontline 5th is safe for anyone who hasn't read past chapter 29 in Gideon the Ninth. Are you guys okay?
Okay.
I don't understand. What did I miss? Okay.
Let's recap. Chapter 28, 8th House Skull. Gideon and Silas talk about the children. Silas makes a play for Gideon's keys. Colum keeps his honor. Chapter 29, 3rd House Skull. Teacher hates the water. Corona Beth wields a sword. A head in a box.
What's in the box? Now we discuss a more detailed point by point of the chapters. It's here.
I'm still so lost.
I think we're just in a mood.
So, Gideon and Harrow are not speaking. And so to spite Harrow, Gideon finds herself accepting Silas's bizarre invitation.
Means yes, probably.
I also just love this as her revenge because the last chapter ends with like, just then Gideon planned her revenge. And you're like,
betrayal.
oh my God, is she going to throw Harrow off the side? No, she's going to go to tea with the 8th house.
I mean, and that doesn't seem like revenge on Harrow. That seems like revenge on yourself.
Which is, okay, I find very relatable because this is how I do spite regularly.
By hurting yourself?
Yes, I really do. I'm like, you can't hurt me, I hurt me. It's not healthy. We can move right along.
Yeah, okay.
Well, she skips the part with the RSVPs and G calendar invites. So when she shows up randomly, Colin's a little surprised. He's, holding a polishing rag and seems to be in his breeches and undies.
And Silas is in the shower, right?
Yeah.
Taking a Sonic. No, his hair's wet, so.
We'll table that discussion. This is already going to be interesting to edit. So,
Jesus Christ.
Necrolord Prime, to you. Colum asks Gideon to leave her weapons at the door. Mixed feelings about that. She's not super happy. And Colum's like, no, we're honorable here, right? Like, you can't bring weapons in here. And he swears that nothing will hurt her in there, so she's not going to need them anyway. So Gideon's like, okay, fine, and goes on in unarmed. And 8th house aesthetic is very antiseptic and boring, kind of like them.
But it's not even boring. It's like painfully, shinily clean. It's got that like
Hospital.
That's what it feels like. The floor is like scrubbed and it's completely empty. They've literally removed all the furniture. So it's not like there's boring furniture. They have made empty space. It's fucking weird.
Ascetic.
Yeah, but they do have a big portrait of the Emperor to lighten it up a little.
This actually was the thing that caused me to go down the rabbit hole this entire weekend. So they call it the portrait is the kindly master, which just always has horrible connotations, right? It's normally used for like Thomas Jefferson, who was like a kindly master to his slaves, or just like so many other things.
Ick and or ew.
Yeah, and also for me at least, it triggered a memory of playing BioShock. Are you guys familiar with BioShock?
Please explain.
You guys might like this because there's a significant like genetic editing component. It's like got some like fun like sci-fi aspects to it, but mostly it is a story of a underwater city founded by a amalgamation of every Gilded Era like billionaire slash like modern libertarian crypto bro who wants to like start an independent country in the ocean. They build an underwater city, and obviously it descends into chaos, right? Because that's what these societies do. And the person that leads the whole thing, his name is Andrew Ryan, no relation. He is like the dictator or like leader of the city. Anyway, the player character goes through the entire city, the entire story progresses, and spoiler, you get to the end and he's just like playing golf in his office. And then he looks at you and starts talking about being a kindly master. And then he says, would you kindly, which is a phrase that activates the main character as a sleeper agent. And basically he becomes a slave slash mind controlled. So anyway, the whole thing basically is just like, it's a flawed universe. I think now part of my conspiracy theory is that the Emperor fucked up somewhere. Like the universe is fucked. And that is mostly because either it's a really deep cut to BioShock or just the kindly master always has negative connotations.
The kindly master does have like really creepy connotations. It's very much like, I'm doing this for your own good.
Yep.
And it's really, really creepy. And I will say, actually, I could totally see Tamsin Muir having played BioShock based on her age, based on her like love of both video games. And then also what John kind of skipped over is like when you're playing the game, it's a dystopia. Like the world has already collapsed. So you're going through this like fucked up underwater city that's like half robotic and there's sparks flying out. And it's like, it's just a mess. It does actually kind of feel Tamsin Muir-y. I feel it.
Nice.
Gideon comes into this. She sees the portrait. She sees their creepy space. And like we said, Silas is in the shower. So Silas comes in and Columns just starts to carefully braid his hair while Silas just starts casually insulting the 9th house and Gideon by default.
It's a weird situation too. It's like an oddly intimate thing to watch Colum braid Silas's hair.
Yeah.
Like it's very domestic, but it is very intimate.
It's weird.
Somebody
They're
with
weird.
wet hair, for some reason, I don't know if this is just me, but like if somebody comes to work with wet hair, it feels very intimate also. Like, I don't know where that comes from. Is that just me?
Sorry, that's hilarious for me. I go to work with wet hair all the time because I cannot be bothered to dry it. I literally just like roll out of bed and directly into like whatever transportation.
It's unreasonable. Like there's like people who have just like endless amounts of hair, and it's like, yeah, you probably showered an hour ago, just like somebody else did with like short, straight hair that like just dried on its own on the way here. But like, I get that. But like for some reason, I look at it, I'm just like, are we that close?
He comments on Gideon and her mom's hair, like basically saying like because Gideon has red hair, she's obviously not from the 9th originally. And Gideon's very much like, don't fucking talk about my mom.
I'm going to get so triggered. Like, I'm just throwing this out here because this just popped into my head. I'm going to get so triggered if at the end of this, Gideon doesn't have a soul and she's a ginger. Like, that is just like a running joke from like the 2000s.
This mostly made me laugh because my brother-in-law is a ginger, and like, I mean, Jack is super chill and doesn't give a fuck now, but like growing up, that was something that really hurt him, was when people would tell him he had no soul because he was a ginger. So I'm team gingers is my point. Hi, Jack.
I think it's partly a nod to like the protagonists with red hair trope in fantasy. Like, that's my take on it.
How do you see the trope?
So like Wheel of Time, your protagonist is special and othered in his community because he has red hair. Who is it? Patrick Rothfuss does this. His protagonist has red hair. I think maybe even, is that true in Sword of Shannara that the protagonist has red hair? Like, it's a thing, right? To be like, you are special.
One of my like core like Who I Am series that I like grew up reading is the Lioness series by Tamara Pierce.
Yes, I love her.
Thank you. I stumbled upon the Goodreads page for like the first book in that series, and like everybody's trashing it because it's just like, oh, just another red-headed, purple-eyed protagonist, like this is bullshit. And then like a lot of people would end up responding to it being like, dude, this was like published in the 1980s. This was where it started.
Right, go fuck yourself. This is the first, because, sorry. Tamara Pierce is a low-key goddess. I love many of the things she has written.
Yep, she is me.
So I feel like that has more to do with the red hair thing, is like it's another piece of the trope of like you are special and different if you have red hair. And it also very much others her from the ninth of being like, you knew from the very beginning that she has this weird birth story and that the mom came from somewhere else.
Why do we assume it's her mom?
Oh my God.
Well, whoever came down with her, right? Like it is assumed to be her mother, like a woman with a baby in a
Just
bio
saying,
container.
only circumstances making us think that.
Fair.
John's losing it this time.
Do we think that the like redheaded hero is the protagonist just because it's like the rarest version of white people? Like it's just like the
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah,
the,
it's
like,
the special
hologra-
thing.
Like,
That's exactly what we're saying.
It's the holographic version of white people, right? Like it's like
Holographic? The shiny version?
yeah, like
Pokemon
like,
shiny?
If
Oh
you
my
need
God,
to
is
make like
that
a
what you're
unique
saying?
white person, it's like a ginger.
Okay. Well, in any case, it becomes very apparent that the information that Silas has and that he's using to goad Gideon with is like both information where you're like, how the fuck do you have that information? And then also information that is slightly incomplete. And it happens that he questions Sister Glaurica, right, which is Ortis's mom, but he didn't question her when she was alive. He questioned her revenant.
I desperately wish you guys could see Jean's eyebrows.
They are a movin'.
We blew up the space shuttle, or somebody blew up the space shuttle.
Somebody blew us with a space shuttle, yeah. So Sister Glorica and Ortis Naganad stole Gideon's shuttle, but then it blew up when they were in transit to the 8th house, and her soul like basically went screaming to the 8th house, and they talked to her then. And then like revenants tend to be a little wackadoodle anyway, and she was already wackadoodle, so not all of the information is complete, but it's more information than the 8th would have ever had. And it's confirmation bias for them as well of like the 9th is a horrible place.
This whole assumption that the 9th planted a bomb while the shuttle was there, that's an assumption. There are other ways for something to explode, unfortunately.
It's a conspiracy.
Silas jumping to conclusions to judge the worst out of people.
Yeah, Silas very much is trying to push Gideon to think that she ordered the shuttle was meant for her. Obviously, why were they trying to kill her rather than let her leave?
But that's not out of the realm of possibility. Like, I agree it's an assumption, but his point is that it was like, his intimation is that it's very rare for these things to happen, that it was a skilled pilot, that it was like a cohort craft. It's not like it was just a shit ass space shuttle. It was like a good shuttle. It shouldn't have blown up, that something had to have gone wrong. And I think it's equally plausible to think that they were trying to kill Ortis and Glaurica, or that they were trying to kill Gideon. Like, it's not like Harrow wanted Gideon to leave.
There's also the possibility of external forces being involved in it.
Totally true.
We don't know truly what happened, but we do know what Silas wants Gideon to think.
Correct.
So that's not what we're here to talk about, right? We're here to talk about the children. So Gideon told us very early on that when she arrived on the 9th as a baby, there were 200 children, but by the time she was 2, it was only her and Harrow and the teenage Ortis. Silas now also knows this story, and he wants Gideon to be like, why did 200 children die? Isn't there something evil about the 9th house? And also is trying to suggest that the 9th house deliberately killed the children. And Gideon's like, there's no fucking way it was a flu epidemic. Like, that's how they died. And what do you mean? Like, Harrow wasn't even born. It couldn't have been Harrow's fault. You can't like lay this on Harrow. And also, like, how come I survived? And Silas is like, It's not how like a bacterial flu works, because it's not going to kill teenagers with functioning immune systems, let alone 100 plus of them.
But like, I will say this is a good argument that he's making, but it's super annoying the way he makes it, because he does it in a classic Judith Deuteros fashion where he just repeats himself over and over, like refuses to elaborate more, refuses to engage. He's just like, that bacteria does not kill immunoefficient teenagers.
I think that there is a possibility that this flu theory has merit, because like we know that the ninth is like basically bound for extinction. It is super decrepit. They lack resources. I don't think Silas actually maybe got that out of Glarica, just like these sort of like scandalous things otherwise. And so it's like a possibility in my head that like these kids were not immunoefficient, if that means like getting their vaccinations, right? Like, but Gideon is from off planet. Like there's a possibility that she's alive. Now, Ortis living is a little hilarious, except maybe it's just that he was a rich boy and his mother was from the 8th and like has access to shit. And then Hera wasn't born yet. So like this is not impossible. Like it's very possible Gideon got her vaccinations as a baby and the others did not.
But all Silas says is like Silas is very much trying to say like how evil the ninth is, and they're trying to kill Gideon too. And Gideon just kind of like, I don't know what you're on. And he says the ninth house is a house of broken promises, and they were never meant to live. They were supposed to roll a rock over the tomb and then die, but they made it a cult instead and started worshiping whatever is in the tomb and the tomb itself.
Can I also point out, so one, we're taking Silas's word for all of this, right? Like, it's not like Gideon saw the shuttle blow up. It's possible that Ortis and Glarica fully landed on the 8th and then were killed there or aren't dead, you know? Like, he's telling us all this information. So also he's telling us that the ninth house wasn't supposed to exist, but that's got to be lore of 9,000 years or more. So I love that he's punishing the ninth house for something that happened literal millennia ago, even if it did happen, as though they like have accurate representations of what happened 9,000 years ago, which we know they do not.
16-year-old religious fanaticism.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, and so basically his leap of logic is that the ninth house is essentially a cult that defied the emperor, which, you know, question mark, if they were doing that, then why didn't the emperor just squish them? Why are they being allowed to continue at all?
Because he's kindly.
He's a kindly master. There we go. But basically, if they could do that, then they are perfectly capable of murdering 200 children. And therefore, there's no way that anybody from the ninth house should be allowed to become a lictor. So I'm going to need your keys.
It's a beautiful pivot.
Nice.
It sounds like, Brooke, you mostly are skeptical of this. Was there any part of you like reading this that was like, oh, fuck, maybe the ninth house is a child murdering cult?
Oh, yeah, I still genuinely believe that those kids got sacked for their Thanergetic juice.
You're like, absolutely, it's right. Also, fuck Silas.
I think we murdered them.
We murdered. Ooh.
No, I think at the very beginning we mentioned that Harrow like goes into like the deep parts of the library and comes back with some necromantic shit that like no one's supposed to know. So like if there is really like a forbidden section of the ninth house library, then maybe, you know, there is some like truly dark shit. And they are kind of a death cult, right? And so
I mean, the whole world is a death cult. It's literally all necromancers waving at ghosts. Like,
yeah, but they're like the dark nuns.
They're the even worse necromancers, okay, Hannah?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're honest, like, I don't know, this whole portion with Silas, he basically tells us, like, not to trust anything that he says, right? Lies mean nothing to the ninth, so he can say whatever he wants. Like, you can do whatever you want. So, like, I read all of this as sort of like your motivations are so suspect to the point that, like, nothing you have to say is going to sit with me too heavily.
Yeah, well, I mean, that kind of happens because Gideon freaks out because she doesn't have a way to defend herself. She kind of like goes to like reach for her sword or to look for her sword and is like, oh, fuck. And Silas is kind of sitting there smirking like, ha, 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 ha. And then Colum steps in and he says, I gave her my word. And this is where that thing, the phrase that you were alluding to, Brooke, comes in, where he says promises to the ninth are as medicine to sand. They do no good and they just sink right in. It means nothing. It's like pouring out medicine. And Colum doesn't feel this way at all. He does not feel that, you know, ends justify the means. He cares about his honor because his honor is the only thing he has. He tells Silas, I'm your cavalier. I've got my sword. I've got my honor. And everything else is yours. And Silas is like, well, no, I've got your sword too. Like, I could like siphon you. He almost, I don't know, is he kind of suggesting in this that he could like basically
take him over
and like force Colum's body to do whatever he wanted?
It felt like that.
It's possible, but I read it more as just your primary oath is to me. You promised your sword to me. If I say stab her, you're going to fucking stab her.
But he does, like, raise his wrist as if he's about to, like
start siphoning him or something.
Or do some necromantic stuff.
And either way, it's this. I mean, it's a pretty fucking heartbreaking moment because here Colum is standing up for what he thinks is true and honorable, and he's like the follower of all followers. He lets his his necromancer siphon his energy regularly, like siphon his soul, but he's not willing to give up his whole self. Like, it's a pretty fucking intense moment.
Yeah.
And Silas doesn't get it. Silas takes a long while to get it.
I don't think he ever does. I mean, it's kind of intimated that, like, this is he's not going to get it because he sees Colum as his tool and his to use however he wants. And Colum is saying, no, I am the oath myself, because there were 3 brothers, each of them born with different blood types, so that they would have whatever the exact match was that they needed for whenever Silas was born. And he tells him, I was 10 years of antigens, antibodies, and waiting. His entire purpose is Silas, but also he is the oath. He is the more honorable thing. And he's much older than Silas. And Colum basically says, I wish, I used to think it was terrible that I was older than you, and you used to think that I knew everything and you just take my word as gospel. But I think that this is much worse, because he says, I respected the child, and at times I can't stand the man, Sai.
Like, that felt like super intimate, right? Like, calling him a short name by his first name and not like master or whatever that he normally does. Like, Colum is like a combination of his experience and his like oath of putting that experience into becoming Silas's cavalier. And like, Silas is like, yeah, of course you're supposed to do that.
It's an interesting insight, though, into their relationship. The idea that Silas wasn't always this fucking, I mean, even 4 years ago or whatever, I don't know how old Silas is.
He's 16, apparently.
Yeah, not that long ago, Silas wasn't this total creep. So, like, not that long ago, Silas was a kid who was trying to learn how to be a necromancer and learn how to work with a cavalier and trusted Colum. And over time became this self-righteous, total douchebag who treats Colum as a tool. And it's actually like, I'm trying to think of something that would be more like hurtful, but like also tough lovey than saying, like, I liked you better when you were a child. Like, you have lost my respect. You have grown
like
into a worse
every
person.
teenager, to be honest.
It's I think it's so harsh. It's a beautiful line.
A large portion of teenagers, I think people want to say that to them.
Fair.
Well, it feels very much like the worst thing that your parents can say to you is that they're disappointed.
Disappointed.
Yeah. Yep.
But this ends with Colum handing Gideon her sword and getting her out of there and basically saying, like, I think next time we meet, one of us is going to be dead. And Gideon leaves, and I think the only thing that I don't even know, like, does she just think I'm sorry, or does she say I'm sorry?
No, she says she takes the moral high ground of not taking him with them, not saying anything, just getting out of there and like letting them deal with their shit themselves.
And instead of it being like a very angry outburst, as soon as she closes the door, it is silent.
It's fucking freaky. She doesn't seem to be compelled by Silas's arguments.
No, but she's in a fucking weird mood.
Yeah, I was going to say weird mood.
Like, she's in a really weird mood. She starts wandering Canaan House again. She stumbles on Teacher. I love this moment as well, honestly, with Teacher. Again, we think
sitting on a
Teacher's
chair
hilarious.
staring at an empty fountain.
Yeah, he's staring at an empty fountain and saying, I hate the water. And she
bad
says,
portent.
but you're surrounded by water. And he goes, yeah, it's a bit of a pisser.
It's definitely written by an Australian.
Kiwi, New Zealander,
sorry.
not Australian.
My bad.
Important
Yikes.
distinguish.
Could also
Awkward.
be a grave error, right? Because it's a locked tomb.
Ha, ha, ha.
What?
Like it could be like a grave error, like it's a
Oh, God.
That's pretty funny.
Maybe I'm reading into this. He's talking about like ponds and rivers. Like, as far as we know, this planet, which we think is Earth, is like a giant sea with a house Like, I think this means that he's really fucking old. I don't know. John and I have been cooking up some conspiracies around this, but like, I think this is all these like very hand wavy things are just like trying to like drop clues. I think that teacher's been around for a long fucking time.
Yeah, and that there was a flood or like the ocean levels rose or something along those lines. So again, way too much time on my hands and too into it this week. I went through and I looked for like mentions of water in the first like 30 chapters and went through it and just like
sorry, we're in chapter 29. I hope you didn't get into 30.
Or sorry, whatever chapter we're up to, right? Like, and so I actually saw like they actually mentioned there's brown smudges like on the Earth when they're coming in through the atmosphere. So I don't think the Earth is fully flooded, but like it's mostly flooded. It sounds like
Waterworld is thematic.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I definitely think this confirms that like there's a flood or like some type of like we're still again river of death or something. Like there's something with water and death that like teacher really just does not like. So too many breadcrumbs and not enough bread at this point.
Oh, well, we're going to have to see how this gets satisfying or not. So Gideon, after her cryptic conversation with teacher, wanders down to the training room where she ages and ages ago dueled Magnus and Nibirius while Hera was watching from the shadows, and the room is empty of cavaliers. Instead, Gideon finds Coronabeth inside, training with a rapier and knife, and Coronabeth is in a super weird mood, and she asks Gideon, have you ever seen a necromancer with a sword?
It's really funny because Gideon's responds basically, no, I thought their arms would just fall off. And Coronabeth says, my sister's would. She can barely hold her arms long enough to like braid her own hair. And that was the most relatable Ianthe has ever been to me.
Yeah, you're like, my arms do get tired braiding my hair.
It's exhausting really quick.
Yeah, she says, I've always wanted to challenge you, but Babs said it was incredible. And it's a weird moment. It's got some elements of sexually charged repartee. It sounds even more so like if you're listening to it, because Corona always has a very breathy voice, and she's very much like, oh, Babs said it was incredible. I always wanted to duel you.
Oh my God.
And it's a creepy undertone, and then Corona lunges at Gideon, and Gideon's like, oh, shit! And they are doing a strange duel until Nibirius cuts in and is freaked. He is terrified, and he's pulling Corona away and saying, you can't.
And Gideon like is looking at this, expects almost for Nibirius to be mad at her. And Nibirius is basically ignoring Gideon. Like Nibirius's full focus in this moment is on Corona and is on his fear. He's not angry. He's like trying to pull her away. And it's such a weird, so much manic energy. This is, as someone with bipolar, it made me wonder if Tamsin like has experienced mania, because the way this is written is that like entirely charged, half panic, half like infinite energy, just like everything is shaking until it's going to fall apart kind of.
I believe that it is like she has like had interviews and talked about like basically she has schizophrenia.
So I wonder if it has overlap with, it's just it was a very, very like compelling moment for me. We'll probably talk about this more in book 2, but like where you just feel like she really understands what it's like to be falling apart.
And I think this is confirmation that Coronabeth is not a necromancer, or at least like isn't good enough to be considered a necromancer. I don't know. There's we still have not yet to see her do anything. I think she's really just not a necromancer, and then that
I don't know.
means
She bites Nibirius.
No,
she does.
She does bite him.
To be fair, like it could just be like a manic expression of like being restrained and like trying to get free, and also having all this manic energy that's coming out. Like, I don't know, biting somebody doesn't feel all that strange, but knowing that they have animophilia, I don't know. I'm thinking that there's she might be like maybe halfway, maybe not a full necro, but like some capability. I don't know.
Now I'm just waiting for like what's fucked up about the second house, because so far, like of the remaining alive houses, we have like Dulcinea is not who she says he is. Cam was not who she said she was, or like is.
What? Where do you get that from?
They tell Cam to go
loud.
Like everyone's trying to like has some like version of deceit with it. Like obviously 9th house, and then 3rd house, Coronabeth is probably not a necro, and then that leaves us 2nd house, and then 8th houses are just fucking weirdos. I don't know. It's going to feed into my conspiracy at the end. It's such a weird scene, right? Because necromancers aren't supposed to be studying the blade.
This is a very random scene. I really don't understand. This is a very short chapter, and the things that happen are she runs into teacher. and he makes some cryptic comments about water. She runs into Corona Beth, and Corona Beth is like fighting her.
And then she is like, oh, this is two really fucked up, weird situations that I'm on the outside of twice in a row. So she just goes back to the room, still in this mood about her fight with Harrow and the overspilling mood of watching these weird necro-cav interactions. And so she sees Harrow's wardrobe ajar and she was like, fuck it, I'm gonna go see what she has. And almost makes her madder when she realizes there was never anything stopping her from rummaging through Harrow's stuff. Almost like
that we know
it's
of.
An insult that Harrow didn't feel like she either needed to protect her stuff from Gideon, or that like either that Gideon would never try, or that she trusted Gideon. It's like either one of those things in the mood that you're in would just drive you insane. And so she finds a box and she's like, aha, like you tried to hide this box. There's obviously going to be something weird in it. And there is. Inside the box is Protessa Laus's severed head, and that is how that chapter ends.
I literally almost threw my phone out the window. I remember I texted you guys like, you motherfuckers. It's like we're really ending the chapters on this. We just find a head in the box and then just like cut to scene. Really, like is that what we're doing?
Absolutely.
I cannot wait to get the next update in about 45
2 hours.
minutes. Once you've read
No,
He's got to drive first.
Oh, he's got to drive.
He's gonna download the Audible and listen to it. Okay. As you were going through this last little bit here, Marie, which we can get to the head here in a second. But like I'm just like mapping out the timeline of like the last like 5 or 6 chapters. Like, okay, so like 6 chapters ago or something, like Pro is gone missing. They all get together and like they have this fight over keys. Cam goes loud. After Cam like gets injured and like everybody leaves, they're like, oh, we should go look for Pro in the facility. And so that's when Gideon and the teens go down to the facility and the teens die over the next like 2 hours or something. We had like, this cool, like exciting, like dueling, immediately followed by death of the teens, immediately followed by like cleaning up the teens. I also like picked up, I realized at some point that they like somebody went down to get Isaac. Like his body was in like the refrigerator. Somebody has got some balls. Several hours after the teens, Gideon has like not been able to sleep right? Is that before she talks to Dulcinea, she tries to sleep, or after she talks to Dulcinea? I'm just trying to figure out, is this all within like 24 hours or over like 2 days?
I don't think so. I think it's over like 2 or 3 days because I think she has slept. She's slept and then they go to do the siphoning from the door.
That's what
and then she has the fight with Harrow and then she goes off on this wandering thing. The day before is the teens die.
Jesus.
And everything else, right? This is like the last 6 chapters at most.
Like 2
are
days.
like 2.5 to 3 days.
Crazy.
Gideon like desperately needs like some therapy. She's not finding it. Part of me was hoping that Teacher would be helpful here, but Teacher is clearly not being helpful.
It seems like Teacher needs some therapy.
Anyway, the head. There are 3 options. 1, it's a trophy that Harrow brought back from killing Pro. Like, that's like the very first thing you're like, Harrow's got Pro's head. It's like, so like the very first thing you have to jump to is Harrow killed Pro. And then you go, wait a second. There are other options here. Option 2, it was a plant. Somebody put it there and pretended to hide it. Option 3 is it was like a package that was delivered to her and like she like, I don't know, like freaked out and just like pushed it in the closet, like threw some boots on top of it and like pieced out to go do whatever Harrow does in the face of like getting freaked out.
But I guess the bigger thing is like why you're doing the timeline is when.
Yeah, over the last 2 days, 3 days since Pro went missing.
Yeah, well, so we know that he was alive the night before they go down to the facility with the twins because the twins say they saw him go down, right? So like he was at least alive going into the facility. Like we have confirmation that he was alive after he went he went missing after he went into the facility. Like we knew where he was until he went into the facility. But yeah, I mean, I basically went through the same process, Brooke, and my kind of logic on it was that, well, necromancers don't cut people's heads off. They like kill them with bone monsters or like necromantic bullshit. I don't think Harrow did it. I'm leaning towards someone planted it. I feel like Harrow did have bone wards and they got rid of the bone wards. I am very suspicious. Naturally, as you are when you find a head in a box.
I've got to find somewhere to hide this box. It's nothing. But before we all head out, it's time to play a game. Interstitial. The 9th heart is barren and the 9th heart is black. At this point, we've all got a handle on the internal character of most of our Canaan House crew, so we're going to play a game we call Realignment. In this game, we are going to identify the D&D alignment of some of the dramatis personae of Gideon the Ninth. Each character is going to be placed somewhere in the good-evil axis and the chaotic-lawful axis. Hey, Hannah, do you want to explain this alignment chart for anyone who has never seen it before?
Yeah. So when you play D&D, you make characters with all sorts of traits, but one of the baseline things that you make is you try and figure out whether they lean towards being lawful, that would be like rule-abiding, or whether they lean towards chaos, and whether they lean towards being motivated by good actions or evil actions. Like,
So neutral's in the middle of like both of these axes?
it's morals versus kind of like the way you do things. Like, are you a person who's just more like are you a person who prepares your presentations ahead of time and carefully practices them over and over? Or are you me, where you throw slides together, stand up there, and assume that something good's going to come out of
Because
it?
it does. It just works for her. It sucks for all of us who have to work a lot harder to do something half as good.
So it's primarily like good, neutral, evil on one axis, and then it's like law, neutral,
So good,
chaos
neutral,
on the
evil
other one.
is the moral code. Lawful, neutral, chaotic is the sort of way you present your activities.
That seems right to me. I think the easiest way to start this is going to be to start with Gideon, because I think we all have a really good sense of who Gideon is. That'll inform the game really immediately.
I think Gideon is good and then neutral on the lawful axis. Is there an order in which we should refer to this, like x-axis first, y-axis second, where x-axis is good, evil?
Yeah, no, so most people will say lawful good.
Because neutral's on both. So y-axis first on our graph that we have here.
I think Gideon is pretty chaotic. I think Gideon is annoyed when she gets told that she has to do things a certain way. But I totally agree with Brooke. Gideon is good. What do you think, John?
I was going to put her in between neutral and chaotic good, because I think she's good, but she doesn't have a lot of respect for the rules. So I would say like she's probably like on the line between neutral and chaotic. She's definitely not lawful good, and I don't think she's quite neutral. So I would say somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
High on the good scale, close to the middle line on the chaotic side.
Let's do Harrow next. Harrow is very definitely lawful, but I think that she's lawful neutral.
I feel like she's a little more good than evil, but she is quite close to the neutral on the good-evil scale.
I don't know. From what John, do you think that she's more evil from like what we've been exposed to?
Yeah, I was
Slightly
going
more on the
to say
evil side?
she's lawful neutral, going towards the evil side.
Yeah, him and I are both. We put her more on the evil side of neutral. You guys put her on the good side of neutral. Interesting.
Well, I put her straight neutral. So
Let's put her straight neutral for now, right? Like, she's quite lawful and right in the middle, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Okay.
How about Silas?
Lawful evil, like the definition of lawful evil.
The definition of lawful evil.
Gross.
Yeah, I think so. Yep, that one's pretty easy.
Then let's do a harder one. What about Column?
I was going to say true neutral.
He's good lawful.
I think he's lawful good, too.
Lawful good. Sorry.
I could put him in.
Not completely lawful good, but closer to good than neutral.
Yeah.
Lawful goodish.
Yeah, lawful good-ish.
Yeah.
So like more lawful than Harrow and a
Yeah.
little more good.
I think
A lot more good,
Yeah, me
but I
too.
don't think like goodest.
All right, can we just slam teacher straight into chaotic good? Like
I think teacher is chaotic neutral. I don't think teacher gives a shit about good or evil. I think teacher is
true.
just
he's not
chaotic.
trying enough to be qualified as good.
Purely chaotic all the way on the chaotic scale, but also we have no idea what his motivations are or what his actual impacts are.
Who already put Marie in chaotic good?
Myself,
Marie
there's a story
did?
here. I may or may not have done this with all of the students in my lab. I may or may not have this in my planner and occasionally ask people to just align themselves on the chart. I may or may not have
people honest
made
about it?
people
How
play
much-
this game. They are.
How much
People may or
evil
may not
side?
have- some people will put themselves a little bit in the evil side, yeah, but generally not. I have also made this a like random points question in my microbiology class where you had to sort out different cell envelopes.
What?
So like lawful neutral is gram positive, but chaotic neutral is gram negative.
Marie, I would have absolutely slaughtered you if you gave that to me as a question on an exam.
It was not on an exam, okay?
Okay, good.
I like the idea of this for extra credit. I feel like there are a lot of genes that I could.
Like in my other semester, I have attendance points essentially. And so like the first question to like make sure that you're logged in is always something completely and totally insane. Like I'll have to send you one. There's one where it's like a bunch of different like cyanobacteria and algae. And it's like basically like click on the picture where you would bite it.
Oh my God.
Okay, chaotic good for Marie. Excellent. Let's keep going.
What do you guys think about like Dulcinea?
Chaotic neutral.
Chaotic.
I'm
neutral.
leaning. I think she's more towards. I don't know. I still think she's lying about something, or isn't like who she says she is. So like,
I think she's good. I think she's a little chaotic and a good bit of good.
So we agree on chaos, but
You don't agree
what
on
do you
good?
feel?
I put her. Yeah, put her.
She's so kind to Gideon. She's the only one. She's the
She's
only
not
one
as chaotic
who has
as teacher
provided
either.
some
Yeah.
level of therapy to Gideon
Okay.
as needed.
I'll agree with that.
Like, I genuinely think she leans like reasonably good, but if you guys want to put her close to neutral, you're welcome to.
I would also like to remind Marie that we can update this as we learn more about different characters.
Because nothing's confirmed. What we know about her now, I think that's where she is, but I still don't.
Leaning good, leaning chaotic.
You're like, something's weird about
I
it.
spent
yeah.
hours going through the names this week, so like I'm full on the board that she's an imposter.
All right, let's keep moving then. What about Judith? Lawful, very lawful.
I was gonna say lawful
She thinks
neutral.
she's good.
I was gonna say lawful
She
neutral.
thinks she's good.
lawful neutral. She's not trying to be good or bad. She's just plain.
The
She's just
following the
lawful.
rules.
examples I have on this Reddit chart I looked up is Dwight Schrute and Cornelius Fudge, and like she is absolutely fudge. So
Yep.
What about? Sorry, that's very good. Okay. What do you guys think about the third house?
I'm now really suspicious of Ianthe. So
Yeah, Ianthe's probably the easiest. I think she leans evil. She's willing to trash people for her own gain. I think she's kind of
I think she leans chaos. She's another stir the pot.
yeah, so I think she's like kind of smack in the middle of evil and chaotic. Like I don't think she's like the most evil and the most chaotic, but like I think she's in there.
I dig it.
But then what about Corona?
Wait, let's do Nibirius first because I also think that he leans a little bit evil, but he's more lawful.
yeah, I was gonna say basically the same spot as Ianthe, but on the lawful side.
I don't think he's that evil. I don't think he's not that strong of a personality. He's just leans that way.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with Corona. I think she wants to be good.
She wants to be good.
I think she wants to be lawful, sort of. No, she's more chaotic.
She might be, I think she's closer to neutral on the chaotic lawful side than almost anybody.
Maybe.
Like, it's not obvious to me
Yeah.
that she's super rule followy, and it's not obvious to me that she's super,
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think she's
chaotic.
I think she's leaning good more so than neutral.
I agree, for sure.
All right, I'm putting Magnus Quinn.
Good and
Lawful
lawful.
good.
Yeah.
He's the definition.
Top right.
Abigail would not be as high on the lawful because we know she was doing some like research that was frowned upon.
Yeah, she'd be like,
Maybe neutral good.
yeah, she would be just further down than Magnus, but like kind of like on
Like-
the same.
She had a little anarchist vibe going if she's doing like research she's not supposed to be doing. I put her fully neutral in that case.
I'll put her close.
There you go. Great. Excellent.
Okay, sixth house.
They are not lawful.
What I want more than what
What do you want?
I'm gonna put them. They're on the good side and slightly lawful, but because I don't feel like they're chaotic. But like I want them to be like between Coronabeth and Abigail on this scale that we're doing in terms of. I think they're solidly good, and it's hard to see like where. I think
And they're kind of like in lockstep.
But I could see them not being necessarily classified as so good because I think that they would be like for the greater good kind of people.
utilitarian, so that moves them more towards neutral, right? So you think, yeah, maybe move them a little bit. I think they're
I
good.
think they're more good, but
Yeah.
All right,
know.
keep them in the middle. I want that for them. I'm protecting my heart.
that's beautiful, and I'm proud of you. Speaking of your heart, Brooke, where do you belong?
I suspect that I am like in a very sad, lawful good area.
Sorry, this is exactly how I feel. Both I feel I am probably lawful good as much as I would like to be chaotic, and I feel guilty for being lawful good.
I'm
but
not
I think
full
that's who I am
lawful.
as well.
Like I am a procrastinator, but like
Well, it doesn't have to do with like, it's like your intentions. Do you believe that people
yes,
should
but
follow
I'm not
rules?
so strict as no, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not like fully lawful.
Are you like an Abigail?
I might
I'm with
actually
you.
be pretty lawful neutral, but I tend to be a rule follower just to take the easy way out.
Look at this.
We're
Look
all
at
the
this.
same
And you
spot.
have me fully
Yeah.
here.
John, explain where you're placing yourself.
I'm trying to find a spot. Yeah, I would say I'm like somewhere there. Yeah, like we're four people doing a podcast about a book. Like we can't like we're definitely in like the lawful good like quadrant. Like we can't be on like we're not terrible people, so we're not on the evil side of things. And like we truly can't be chaotic. I don't think we can be that chaotic.
Marie can.
So
Marie can.
is it that none of us want to think of ourselves as lawful, or like I guess I'm uncomfortable with.
Well, my thing is like I very much the older I get, the more I'm like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be this far down on chaotic. It's like in reality, this is where I turn out to be, not how I actually feel about things. Because my thing very much is like if there's a rule or if I'm told to do something, like it keeps getting worse and worse and worse the older I get. I'm like, you know what? Fuck you. Like I do not want rules, and I feel more like, yeah, this one's tough because I'm like, there should be rules for other people.
My problem is literally I'm so frightened of being yelled at that I am a de facto rule follower.
Same.
But it's more about fear than anything else.
And so if there's
And in
no
terms
fear
of, like,
structure, then you're willing to break the rules.
yeah, well, and so for
To do what
instance, I'm
makes
much
sense.
more of a wing it kind of person, which is a chaotic direction rather than like a highly prepared. But
I'm not that.
I could go either way. I'm pretty happy with my placement here.
I think it's legitimate, probably.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that this is where my students put me.
Marie, I think being chaotic good is.
Oh, I love this for you.
Perfect.
I don't. I aspire to it.
This is borne up by evidence that you have all used to describe me in various games,
Slightly
such
unhinged.
as calling me slightly unhinged.
One time.
Chaotic was a better word for it. Is it? I don't know.
Don't know. Okay, amazing. So we're putting this on Patreon, huh?
Yes. So if you go back to the script or whatever.
A reminder, I am chaotic good. Well, I hope that you all enjoyed that, because for those of you who are patrons, we will put this final graph up on Patreon. And for those of you who are not, I get it. We get it. Money doesn't grow on trees. And John, well, let us tell you to just rob banks on the podcast.
But you should.
What?
What? This is lawful good over here.
And you put yourself
lawful
in
good
lawful
over
good.
here.
We got to change
All right, I'm
this.
moving myself
changing
into
this
chaos.
right now.
I'm sorry.
changing this right now. Now that we've already got our bulletin board and push pins out, it seems like a good moment for some rampant speculation. Act 3, Waste No Truth on Liars. Now is the time when we ask our beautiful newbie necros to tell us about the skeletons that are in their closets, which is to say, we ask for conspiracy theories. So, Brooke and John, what the fuck is happening?
So I don't have a lot. I know that John is going to get cooking here, so I just want to briefly say.
What do you mean you don't have a lot? You got a whole paragraph.
Yeah, but like we've already kind of covered a lot of this. We already covered a lot of this. John doesn't think that Harrow decapitated anyone. I don't either. It just doesn't feel like her style. For the same reasons, not having any bone wards, barely hiding shit. It just doesn't feel right. So
Her style is more of gang banging by skeletons.
highly prepared. Yeah, and also like connecting back to Silas's accusations against the Ninth, like forever how like creepy and mean and domineering that Harrow can be. I just don't think that like casual murder, like via bombing or the sort of casual murder that precedes decapitation, like just doesn't feel like it's in her wheelhouse. So I don't think that happened. I think somebody either put it there or delivered it to her and she like freaked out and wasn't prepared enough in the light of getting a head delivered to her reasonably, I think. But the Ninth House, all the kids in the Ninth House, them disappearing, does make me wonder more about her parents. So I looked back and there are hints to their death maybe being by suicide, because it talks about them swinging from the ceiling of their cell, which cell's an interesting word to use when Harrow's 10.
Can I give you a stupid microbiology fact, Brooke?
Yeah.
So Robert Hooke is the person who gave us the word cell by looking through a microscope at a piece of cork, because the little divisions looked like monastery cells.
Monastery cells.
Fascinating.
So your little room in a monastery is a cell, and that is why we have cells.
Where the hell did we get jail cells then?
Same idea, I'm sure.
small single occupancy room.
Curious. Appreciate that. context helps. But she found them dangling from the roof of their room. And like that to me suggests suicide, although many murder mysteries have talked about ways that can be faked. But my thought now is like maybe they were complicit in the disappearance of children and they just couldn't handle it after a while. Like they had enough good in them to like not be able to live with that. We talked about the flu story having some merit, but I do genuinely believe that these kids were shuttled away or something, or completely killed for phallergetic fuel. But John has some really cool theories. I'm excited for him to share.
So this all started off trying to figure out like a little bit more about the houses, and I got into names, and I got into planets. This unraveled very quickly. So let's see here. So I think we can confirm that the 6th house is on Mercury, because they're close to the sun. They live in like a bunker, basically. And I think the 7th house is on Venus.
And they told us actually at the beginning, I was like glancing back at an older chapter, and they said that there were two planets, the 6th and the 7th were on planets closer to the sun than Earth was.
Yep.
Yes. So I think 7th is on Venus because their names, they're born on Cyprus and Rhodes, which are associated with Aphrodite, who is Venus. And then the 3rd house is born princess of, oh my God, I'm blanking on it. I didn't write it down. Ida. And Ida is a nymph that's involved with both Kronos and Zeus in Greek mythology. So that could be either Saturn or Jupiter. Unsure there. So that makes me think the Mars might be the 2nd house, which would explain like the war thing, right? Because like Aries is, and Mars is like the god of war. So also put a joke in there that they might be from Uranus because they're assholes. But all right, so just continuing through, I went through and started doing a deep dive, which I feel stupid for not doing earlier, about through all the names in the book. And this is what I came up with. So Judith in the Bible cuts someone's head off to save the city. So that seems particularly relevant when we just found Protesilaus' head in a box. Yep. Naberius is a general of hell who is a 3-headed dog. And it also is a similar name to Cerberus. Basically, like it's a Greek mythology Bible, like, you know, carry through line. Hold on a sec.
The Judith story, since it's very poignant at this point where we found a decapitated head. The Judith story is apparently that like it was a general whose head she chopped off, and it was like to save her city. This is very compelling.
But also, they don't have a key to the facility, so if Protesilaus was down there, they couldn't have killed him while he was down there. They would have had to wait for him to come up, right, and jumped him. So, I don't know, there's something there. Judith had to cut someone off. Naberius is named after the, basically, Cerberus, the guard dog of the river Styx, and also Hades. And then Ianthe is the name of a nymph when Persephone is kidnapped. And then when Persephone becomes the bride of death, right? Hades' bride, and Corona is a crown. So maybe at some point Corona Beth gets kidnapped or is sacrificed to death or evil or something. I don't know. If all these names are so associated with, I don't know, there's something there. I'm skipping the 4th house, Brooke, because that's your stuff. You can come back to that. Abigail, 5th house, I don't think particularly relevant. Palamedes is a brilliant general from the Trojan War. He uncovers disguise and trickery. He gets killed by Odysseus. He has basically a revenge plot. And then Camilla is thrown across a river on a spear as a baby. She becomes a warrior huntress. And I think it's also weird that her last name is Hecht, which is not 6, it is 100. Dulcinea is the made-up imposter from Don Quixote. Protesilaus is the first Greek to die in the Trojan War, which is hilarious because, you know, obviously his head just got cut off. Column is Dove. His last name is Ash, which is bone. And then Silas is a fervent earlier believer in Jesus, which I think makes sense there.
Column is a dove. Symbol of peace, right?
Sacrificial.
Ooh,
what?
that makes sense.
Sacrificial dove.
You do sacrifice doves.
What?
Right.
Who does?
The Romans.
Shit.
And then Harrow, which you people, this podcast made me go into weird Christian subreddits to figure this out because it's not explained very well and it's not believed by all Christians, is that harrowing is basically Jesus descends into Hades and or hell and returns during when he's dead, right? Like during the period before resurrection, but after he's crucified.
Really? And that's the harrowing?
Yes. If you look at that, it's, again, alluded to in the Bible. Some people believe it, some people don't. But it seems like the harrowing is they go into hell to talk to the dead and then absolve them of their sins and or like lead them out. It depends on which version you believe.
You decide if you believe that or not.
Yeah, I don't know. But Hark is just listen. So like listen to the harrowing. And then Gideon is the general who frees the Israelites under overwhelming odds.
So are these all, so far, we've got a mixture of like Roman and biblical.
Yeah, Greek, Roman, and biblical all seems to be pieces here. So, and that's part of what makes this so hard is to like figure out what version of death are they using. Also, like Pluto, which is where the 9th house is also known as Hades, right?
Dude, I think that's
Roman
cool.
planet names. And so Hades is also like the god of death, but also literally the location of death as well. So now I'm starting to lean more towards like they literally actually like lictor death and like the body of death is in the tomb, or like the
John,
spirit
that
of
is
death. Like
fucking
something
cool. That Hades is locked up in the tomb in some sort of eternal slumber. Maybe that's what the kids were sacrificed for.
Yeah, it's death. It's death or God or like whatever the god of death. It's the deity is.
Pluto is
Yes.
Hades. Yeah, that's
Yes.
what that is.
And then finally, the last thing was just that I do think between Palamedes saying that the logic is flawed in the creation of Lictor, the Lictor theory, and the actually kindly master painting, which brought me back to BioShock, which maybe it's a deep cut reference or maybe it's just like feeding into my conspiracies. I really do think like all of the houses are failing or the universe is like falling apart and the Emperor fucked up somewhere. Like he tried to create the paradise or like the new kingdom of death or whatever the hell we've got going on here, and they fucked up somewhere.
We have a lot of these theories about there being some sort of like flood. We have theories about Lictor. You have theories especially about like whether, you know, God sent this flood or something in response to Lictordom, or whether maybe the flood forced humans into finding some new survival tactics that included Lictordom, right?
The only other thing I just want to mention is that very early on in the very first chapter of the book, they say the kindly Prince of Death when they're describing the Emperor.
Prince of Death.
Son, that would be the son of God, right? Like if God is king, then Prince would be the son. And so like, does that set him up to be a Jesus Christ figure that's behind the rock, right? So like this is what happened with conspiracy theories. I'm still like, is it the Emperor or Death behind the rock in like on Pluto? Is it like a combination of them? Yeah. Also, it's just because Judith cut someone's head off to save the city, and Protesilaus is the first Greek to die during the Trojan War. I think Protesilaus was not killed by whatever killed the fifth house and the fourth house. I think it's a separate killing, and the Trojan War sometimes is like basically like Greeks fighting their cousins, basically. And so if it's the first person to die during the Trojan War, then I think it's one of the other potential lictors killed Protesilaus, as opposed to whatever killed the fourth and fifth house, which I still think is a lictor that's running around, or like the spirit of a lictor running around the Cannon house. Okay, I'm done.
Well, I guess we'll see if John comes back next week when we're all amped up for a confrontation in Gideon the Ninth, chapters 30 and 31.
If you, dear listener, I like myself and John, and reading along for the first time, make sure you find our reading calendar on our website, frontlinefifth.podbean.com, or follow us on Instagram or maybe TikTok, which are both linked in the show notes. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends and give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And if you didn't like it, feel free to lie. Now head off to sleep, my baby necros. Mommy and Daddy have some deep spoilers to discuss.
Get in, losers. We're going speculating. Do you want to bang this out?
Act 4, How I Hate the Water. I missed it. That's what she said.
Was there a That's What She Said?
Let's bang this out.
Warning. This portion of the podcast is 98% spoilers and like 2% snickering.
Seriously, we will spoil anything and everything in the series up through Note of the Ninth. So if that's not what you want, turn back now. Well, fuck.
Okay, I'm going to be honest. It's been a long day. Yesterday was a long day, so I may have spaced out during part of John's list of names, but I did want to come in on one thing in particular.
Please.
I love that Protesilaus is the first person to die
funny.
in the Trojan War,
So fucking
because
funny.
I was like, that's a little on the nose, Tamsin. I was like,
So fucking funny.
I was like,
So funny.
yes, he is very, very dead before they even land. He's literally the first person to die. And the other thing that I thought was funny about that was that, like, if anyone is a Trojan horse, Dulcinea Cytherea is. Like,
Yep.
she's literally coming in there disguised as a totally, I think it's like a perfect analogy. I love it.
Yeah. So those two, perfect. They make sense in this book. I feel like Column as a sacrificial dove and Silas as an early convertant to Christianity absolutely makes
Perfect.
sense thematically. Don't have to go any further than this book. Palamedes and Camilla, I think, are actually pretty straightforward names.
Camilla, to me, like, I mean, is just like, it was generic warrior. Like, it sounds
Exactly.
like her backstory maybe isn't super important, but she is a warrior woman.
And same thing with Palamedes, like smart dude
Yeah.
also. Like makes sense. And anyway, they
Checks out,
have a
checks
new
out.
name that is interesting, right? Of
He's
like,
going to have to go on a deep dive into Paul, too.
yeah, okay. So then the thing that I caught, which is interesting, but I don't know how much to read into it with Ianthe, is when Tamsin talks about the way that she named her characters, she names them like Cana, Beth, and Abella.
Sorry, I forgot you had told me this and I had completely forgotten that she intentionally initially was going to make it an Cain and Abel reference, right?
Yeah. And then she was like, that's a little too on the nose. So I think that it is fascinating. There's a few things that I'm kind of dealing with here is Judith, we still don't know whose head she's going to cut off. She is still in the story.
I will say that so she could go on to cut off someone's head. But I think the other thing that people forget about Judith, and this was like a funny one for me because I used to absolutely adore Judith. I loved the story that she wasn't allowed to be part of the army. And so she kind of like pushes back against her brother by deciding she's going to do something anyway. And she goes and does this thing, seduces this captain or general or whatever, and cuts off his head. And then I actually read the Bible story because I liked the, broad story enough. I went back and read it. And most of Judith's story is about how she's obsessed with being chaste. She's like deeply, deeply obsessed with following the rules and being entirely virgin.
Which makes it even crazier that she is going to go seduce someone to get this done.
Right. Well, so at its core, it's about giving up your sense of self and morals and like who you thought you were in order to save. Yeah, exactly. So it is actually like an interesting and complex character that I think suits her.
Yes. Which also I think still is kind of like because she still very much is holding to this, I am a captain in the cohort and I am in enemy territory and I have been captured. And so even though she's insane most of Nona, and she's been basically like slowly rotting from the inside out since the end of this book in Blood of Eden Hands, there is still plenty of time for her to give up her chastity for a higher purpose.
There certainly is. And I'm really interested to see. It's such a fucking weird choice to keep her alive. Don't you think that's a crazy choice?
They want her because they wanted somebody who could do stealies.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they were stealing. That was what it was, is they were stealing ships and then you have to have a necro. And that was why they wanted her.
But even like not from like a plot point standpoint, from like a Tamsin is choosing who's going to show up in book 2. And it makes sense that Corona stays. It makes sense that Camilla stays. And then Judith is such a she's a dark horse character. Like don't know what's going to happen next.
So then I think that it is kind of fascinating that both Nibirius and Ianthe are so deeply associated with like hell and death, right? So Nibirius as a demon who is a general of hell, or even the kind of twist with the name on Kerberos or Cerberus.
I love that because they show up with 3 people. They're the only ones with 3 people. The 3-headed dog really vibes as who they are.
And then if Ianthe is the name of a nymph who is there and associated with the whole mess when Persephone becomes the bride of death, I thought that was a really interesting way to put it because one thing that we know about Alecto is that there is a wedding.
How do we know that? What do we know there's a wedding?
This is words of Tamsin.
I'm plugging in my computer, so keep talking.
So I find that really interesting. I think that Nibirius being the guard of hell and being kind of what is fueling Ianthe's lictorhood, and then the fact that Ianthe is there when Persephone becomes the bride of death. I don't think that it's Ianthe getting married. It might be Corona.
Ooh, I like that.
But then who is Corona marrying? Who is death? In this scenario, it would make sense if it was Jod, but maybe it's Alecto.
This is absolutely going to fuck up my microphone again.
Just do it, Queen. That's what she said. In case you think I can hear you, I can't. I wish that I could do better lip reading. There you are. You're back.
Okay, it's working. So 1, 2, 3. The other thing is like, I know that there's a lot of meaning behind the names, but there also comes a point where you're just like, okay, she just wanted like creepy death type names.
Maybe that too. Yeah.
Is there any chance that with Abigail and Magnus, she just was like, generic white people names?
I think so. I forget I'm sure there's meaning, but I forget what it is. We'll get there when we do extra episodes. It's fine. When you have Harrow and the harrowing of hell.
That was fascinating. I didn't know that harrowing was anything other than like, whoa, harrowing.
Very much setting Harrow up as a savior figure. And that if she has to go down into hell to absolve the dead of sins, or if that's what the harrowing of hell is in like Christian belief, then it would make it so that she has to kind of go into the river to fix whatever is wrong with the souls.
I think this is perfect. I love the idea of her going to effectively rescue the 10 billion who died, to rescue their souls and recover them from whatever like horror that Jod has inadvertently forced upon them.
But also to rescue the 200 that were the horror that were forced on her. And then Gideon being the general who saves the Israelites.
That again feels a little on the nose.
Yeah, like Harrow is there to save their souls, but Gideon is there to save them physically.
To what degree do you think she decided that she wanted to name her protagonist Gideon? Or did she decide that she wanted basically like the lictor, like Gideon the first saint of duty, to be named Gideon and set up our Gideon's whole birth story? Like,
which Gideon?
Yes, for sure. But the other thing is like, okay, so if you go deep cut in the Bible, that's what Gideon means. But also what Gideon means to most people is Gideon's Bible, the like Bible that you find everywhere you go. It's just
Rocky Raccoon.
I used to loved that song.
Me too.
I had a deep obsession with the Beatles when I was in like elementary school and middle school, and then it faded out as I attempted to become more hardcore and listen to metal.
Oh no, I made
and then it was nothing but Slipknot.
Listen to Beatles all day Thursday, and I was singing along, and they were all like, "What is this song?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? What is this song?
What? What?
Like okay. Very much like, how do you know these?" And I'm like, "I had a Beatles phase. Okay, I don't know why that isn't a thing anymore."
No, the answer should be, how do you not know them? They are literally iconic. That's fine. That's fine. It's fine. I'm fine.
We're fine.
You know what? Here's what I would like to do briefly is to just bring it back to some of the things we talked about our very first couple of episodes. One of the things that we were talking about is the ways in which this is a book about love and about relationships. And I feel like these chapters are a particularly interesting set of insights. We start at the end of last episode with this horrible fight between Harrow and Gideon. And then the kind of understanding of relationship and power in the 8th house is so complex and painful. And then Corona wanting to get to be someone she's not, and instead having to pretend to be another person she's not, never getting to be her own self. I just feel like this whole set of chapters is about watching people peeling back the skin over these wounds that have been open and festering and that always hurt. And for the first time, you're getting to see them. And it's just it's a painful thing because Gideon knows about her own pain. I think she forgets that other people have the degree of complexity and the degree of pain that they do. And in a weird way, it hurts her to see it.
Yeah, and I think that this is an interesting kind of study in the fact that in this universe, the necro-cav relationship is set up as something that is kind of like almost mystical and holy and sacred and idealized. And it reminds me of all the ways in which we do this to specific relationships. And if your experience with those relationships does not fit, then you are made to feel as though you as a person are kind of fundamentally doing something wrong, or you are unlovable, or you just aren't doing it right. You're kind of broken. And it reminds me of, children who have to go no contact with their parents.
Yeah.
Or the way that marriage and romantic love in Western society has been set up to really isolate people from other relationships in their lives. Because when you set up somebody to be everything to you and you're not supposed to go anywhere for any other type of fulfillment. You know, you're supposed to have somebody who's your best friend and your lover and your life partner and your family.
And then you have to feel guilty if you feel like you're not getting all of those things in one place, right? Like you have to feel like you are a failure if it turns out that one size doesn't fit all. And I think part of what's cool about these chapters is it's a reminder that one size doesn't fit anybody, that like you kind of have to shape it around you. Said. It has to be
I'm so sorry.
That a good partnership is about creating a novel space between you that's something you make. It's not something that's foisted upon you.
And I think it's so interesting because of all of the relationships that you see, they are all flawed in some way. So, you know, you take the 9th, you have Gideon and Harrow. They are incredibly fucked up and incredibly complicated. And you could spend an hour just talking about all of the ways in which they have a very intense and strange relationship that is incredibly complicated. And then you go to the 8th, and we just saw all of the ways in which that is an incredibly twisted and complicated, you know, relationship. You go to the 7th, and even with the real Dulcie and Protesilaus, that was also a very kind of complicated one, because it was essentially that Protesilaus was her cavalier because his kind of glory days were behind him, and he was there to kind of take care of her. He was there to be an extra family to her and give her a reprieve from her continual illness.
It feels a lot more like her uncle than it does like, yeah.
And then what, you go down...
The lights just went out on me. It's you know, it's perfect.
Is it? The 6th, again, we have very different ideas on the 6th, but I think that they are another very painful relationship just because of the way it ended, you know? And like they even tell each other, like, I was on the Reddit, and somebody was, you know, basically pulling out lines from them becoming Paul and you know, like, you know, love is too long and life is too short. And you're like, just, oh my God, there's like, you know, stab me and pull my hair out and just, you know, leave me on the side of the road for roadkill. Like, I cannot handle you two. And also I think this is a horror. Like I'm very uneasy about
you're
it.
right that we have a different take on it. But I think no matter whether you think that they're codependent or whether you think that they are like, so I think they're beautifully interdependent. It still is in an exclusionary relationship, right?
Yeah,
like
it doesn't allow room for anybody else, really. Even like sort of Dulcie, but also that makes it weird. Like they couldn't separately. Like it's not like Palamedes could love Dulcinea, and that would be that.
No, because Cam would always be living in the next room. Yeah.
It would always be the three of them. It becomes clear in later books that it was always the three of them, and that you just don't see as much from Cam about, you know, until later about how she felt about Dulcie.
No, and then I think the other one that's interesting is you have the 5th house, who I think actually have a truly generous and thoughtful marriage, and don't necessarily have a good... I was going to say, but I think that they're not a great necro-cav pair, like in a weird way.
Specifically because they're married, it's kind of like when you work with your spouse.
Yeah. I mean, they're like happy together, but whether they're, you know, functional and powerful and willing to sacrifice themselves and one another in quite the way that you need to be able to really rely on someone, you know, like I don't think that Magnus would let Abigail get hurt, even if it was part of what they needed to do. I don't think Abigail would let Magnus get hurt, even though that's part of what, you know, they need. So it's a complicated situation.
And then if you move into the 4th house, teens, you're like, okay, well, it kind of makes sense why all of these relationships would be completely fucked if you are starting them at like, what, 9-10 years old?
Yeah, and clearly kind of getting assigned to them. Like Jean Marie says, she was like, she was mad at Isaac. He wasn't at all what she wanted.
Yeah. And then 3rd house is obviously incredibly bizarre because you have the familial blood relationship in addition to whatever is going on. And then very much like Ianthe and Corona are so toxically inter and codependent that there isn't room for Nibirius to be anything other than a tool.
Yes. He really like just feels like a puppy who's following them along. But he's much less likable than a puppy who's following them along. But it is, I think, a big piece of why this kind of comes up in Harrow the Ninth, that Ianthe actually has a lot of trouble integrating Nibirius's soul. And that's partially because I don't think they had anything in common. I don't think they had a relationship.
Right.
Whereas actually this moment we get to see with Corona and Nibirius is a really interesting one. He's really trying to protect her. Like, I think they would have been an okay Necro-Cav pairing, except she's not a fucking Necro.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the impression that I get too, is that Nibirius's relationship with them was like an actual relationship, but tainted with Corona, because he could never have a real relationship with Corona with Ianthe around. And then he didn't have a relationship with Ianthe. He was told what to do by Ianthe. I mean,
it's incredibly telling that Ianthe solves all of the challenges mostly without doing them, literally just looking at them on her own. She's not even willing to bring her sister or Nibirius down and let them in on what she's finding out. She wants to be solo. She wants to be the sole power.
And then talking about, twisted relationships, you have this really interesting thing in, is that in As Yet Unsent, I believe?
Yeah, the Judith's like letters to the cohort as she's in Blood of Eden captivity.
Right, but basically where she's telling Camilla that Camilla needs to let go of Palamides' bones, that she needs to like move on, that she is just too horribly codependent and interdependent with Palamides, and you should never be in love. There should never be any kind of relationship that way between Necro and Cav, and she learned that lesson.
So this is something I actually wanted to bring up, is that one of the things that currently happens in this book is people say some version of the phrase, a necromancer should never have to watch their cavalier die, or a cavalier should never have to watch their necromancer die. Mm-hmm. Both of those things get said. And I think it's such a funny, again, oversight on people's parts, realizing that it's not a fucking directional thing. The whole point is that when it's a partnership, it is devastating to lose half of yourself. And it doesn't matter which one you were, even though both of them somehow seem to think that they're in charge of protecting the other one. Yeah. Like Judith says it's stupid to have to watch your cavalier die. And then Gideon says when Isaac dies, it's stupid. No one should have to watch their necromancer die. Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, yeah,
I guess that's it. So Act 5. See you next time, my little nunlets. Well, it looks like we've got a head in a box to dispose of. Can I just tell you, this entire time I've been thinking of the meme dick in a box.
Okay. Well,
but don't worry. We'll be back next week to talk more about the children of the ninth in chapters 30 and 31. If you want to follow along with us, our reading calendar is available on our website at frontlinefifth.podbean.com, and you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok. It's back, which may or may not exist. Oh.
At the time this episode actually gets published, who knows?
Who knows? But which are both linked in the show notes anyway. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends and give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And of course, if you didn't enjoy the podcast, feel free to lie. We have a Patreon, which you can join for access to bonus content every month. You can become a patron, and we do love our patrons, at patreon.com/frontlinefifth. Finally, if you have any fun theories you'd like to share with us, feel free to email us at frontlinefifth@gmail.com. And with that, I will just remind you not to unlock any tombs or enter any doors without permission because, ghosts. Bye!
Frontline Fifth is a Locked Tomb podcast conceived by Marie Adamako and starring Marie Adamako, Hannah Grunwald, Brooke Anderson, and John Ryan. Our cover art was designed and created by Marie Adamako, who also edited this episode. Our fabulous music was composed and recorded by Blake Anderson. The Locked Tomb series is a completely dope-ass book series by Tamsin Mirror, who does not know we exist and is in no way affiliated with this podcast.